Have you ever noticed that gap between what we understand about our lives and how we actually live them? We often can find ourselves moving through the world as if we are a personality that just happens to have a body. But what happens when we stop resisting the situation we find ourselves in and instead meet it with a bit of wonder? I'm Christiane Piano, and this is your Reset Reflections, a space for the unfiltered reality of being human. This isn't about finding a magic formula or a distraction. It's an invitation to a different kind of attention. Over the last 2 years, this expression has evolved into a place where we discuss the things most people don't, the challenging parts, the joyful parts, and the quiet rigor of unlearning the patterns that keep us stuck. Whether you're here for the first time or returning to these layers again, I invite you to just sit back, listen, reflect, and see what opens up when we finally move toward wholeness. I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin. Hello, I am Christiane Piano, and welcome to episode 108. We are sitting just on the other side of the summer solstice, and here in Italy, the days have stretched out, and I personally am naturally moving into a slower, more spacious cadence. The online Body-Mind series has concluded for the season, and I am stepping into a quieter period of individual privates and deep one-on-one conversations. And as I settle into this warmer rhythm, I find myself wondering where you are landing as you listen to this today. How is this seasonal shift landing in your life? Are you feeling a natural invitation to slow down and breathe? Or is the momentum of your daily responsibilities still pushing you to constantly produce, manage, and perform? Since releasing episode 107, which was the first reflection I recorded while abroad, I've been intentionally practicing that exact pause myself. I wanted to honor the art of not pressuring myself to produce. I didn't want to force an idea onto the page just to satisfy an old timeline. Instead, I chose to sit quietly, adapting to the moving parts of my own life, until I felt a specific frequency calling for our next conversation. And so here we are. And what surfaced in that quiet space is an inquiry into how we measure our lives, our progress, and our connections. It is a reflection on a foundational reality check that we often explore within the deeper layers of this body of work. That is, mostly, we don't live what we understand. I invite you to just let those words sit with you for a moment. Mostly, we don't live what we understand. We often gather so much information. We read the books, we listen to the podcasts, and we analyze our past behavior until we have built a beautiful, flawless, intellectual map of our dynamics. And yet, there is often a distant gap between the rational clarity in the mind and our actually lived choices out in the world. Why is it that a mental insight can feel so incredibly clear, yet our bodies continue to hold the exact same pattern of bracing? Why is it that our conceptual clarity so rarely shifts the physical reality of how we occupy our own skin? When we look at this gap from the intellect, it can feel deeply frustrating. The rational mind loves to live behind what I think of as a glass window. From behind that glass, we can look out and see our patterns with stunning distance and precision. We can explain our behavior and stamp a story on our discomfort. But staring at and understanding through a window is a completely different domain than gently growing our capacity to actually feel what is occurring right now in the body. From behind that glass, the mind tries to manage and micromanage everything. It loves to play this game where it splits your day into neat, rigid categories. This is good, that is bad, I am winning, or I am losing. This is right, or this is wrong. I think you get my drift. If the mind can slap a label on your day, it gets to feel like it's in control. So it starts measuring everything, always looking for a score, tracking physical outcomes, or counting up how many minutes we spent doing a practice. We touched on this thread briefly once before, back in the 100th episode. And we explored the idea that not everything that counts can be counted. But it is so easy for the mind to lose sight of that reality. We are so conditioned by a measurable world that we look for external proof that we are doing life right, looping in an exhausting back and forth oscillation, trying to force a perfect outcome. And when we try to force our lives to fit an external rule book, it's like trying to walk in shoes that don't fit, or forcing a piece into the wrong puzzle. It's a physical strain. You feel it in your shoulders, your jaw, your breath, just to name a few. And you become unsteady. Staying on that hamster wheel is deeply exhausting. But if you are feeling that kind of heavy fatigue right now, please know it isn't because you aren't trying hard enough. It doesn't mean you lack discipline. And it isn't a personal flaw. It's just the natural exhaustion that comes from trying to think our way through a life that is meant to be felt. Because your body doesn't actually care about charts, checklists, or perfect scores. It doesn't look at life that way at all. It speaks to you through how a moment actually lands, whether it brings a sense of ease or feels completely out of sync. I personally was given a beautiful, humbling reminder of this truth during a recent, very intense, month-long trip to the United States. The first 3 weeks of that journey were spent at my brother's home, and it was a full-on, deeply immersive experience with his children. We were thoroughly woven into the fabric of real daily life together. Things like cooking meals, playing board games, cleaning the house, drawing and sharing long walks to school. We explored different ways of eating, bringing a gentle awareness to how the food we put in our bodies directly impacts our mood, our sleep, and how we show up. We shared deep conversations, high energy play, and necessary pockets of intentional quiet time. We were simply being together, hanging out, completely in the flow of their world. And naturally along the way, a few Italian and Japanese words wove their way into our daily games and conversations. Now, Italian may make sense because I've lived here for over 25 years, but you might be wondering where the Japan piece comes from. Well, right after completing my undergraduate degree, I spent 2 years living and working there. It is fascinating for me to notice how deeply that experience continues to shape me. Because even now, all these years later, those threads still ripple through the way I show up and express myself. And living inside that shared rhythm, a quiet curiosity had been born in my nephews. When my partner arrived at the airport later that month, they completely surprised him by calling out a welcome entirely in Italian. I can't even begin to describe the smiles at the moment. And to my absolute delight, I realized that this spark stayed with them long after we parted. I discovered this just a few weeks after I returned home here to Italy, when my 9-year-old nephew FaceTimed me on his mother's phone. He looked right at me and said, "Aunt Didi, do you know about Duolingo?" I smiled and said, "Well, yes, I do." And he beamed and he said, Well, I'm studying Italian now, and he has been entirely consistent with it ever since. It left me deeply touched, and it really made me look at how we define and differentiate growth. Certain outcomes can be measured. My nephew can track his daily streak on that app, and we can look at that tangible data. But the internal ignition that caused him to want to learn in the first place, the invisible shift in resonance that actually moves a child or any of us to choose a new path, that cannot be calculated or put into a spreadsheet. I wasn't tracking a metric during those 3 weeks. I was just anchored in the vitality of my own life, and he naturally caught that frequency. That foundational layer of growth and impact is completely invisible to the rational mind and its binary rules. Now, to connect this for you, that same month-long journey also included a final leg in New Orleans, and the exact same theme played out there too. Even though it was my very first time visiting the city in person, I have a beautiful community of clients who live there. When we were scheduling their upcoming one-to-one calls, knowing I would be there physically, they suggested that we do our sessions in person rather than online, and I thought, sure, why not? So I spent a week doing those one-to-one body-mind maturation calls in person, getting to know the people who had previously only met me through a screen, and reuniting with old clients who had traveled to see me here in Italy in the past, as well as met new people. We also had a meet and greet along with a first-time ever Body Mind Reset live session. Stepping into that live room brought up a reflection that occasionally rests in the background of my thoughts when it comes to putting my work out into the world. Whether I am sharing on Instagram, sending out newsletters, or creating content for In the Kitchen, which is the newest branch of the tree with only 3 episodes published so far, the analytical mind can easily default to looking at the glass window of digital data. It looks at the likes, the comments, the follower counts, and the subscriber metrics, trying to split the relevance of this work into a neat category through those thin numbers. But the level of profound, life-giving connection in that New Orleans room completely shattered the illusion of that digital screen. Afterwards, one of my active online clients, who was meeting me in person for the very first time, shared something beautiful. She said that during the live practice, she had her eyes closed, and at a certain point, she actually had to remind herself that I was physically in the room with her. Now, it wasn't that the realization of this connection was entirely new to me, but it was the very first time I received that specific, explicit feedback from someone who had previously only experienced my presence through a screen. To hear that the experience of our connection held the exact same integrity in person as it did across an ocean was a profound confirmation. Frequency doesn't care about the medium. And this is a vital reality check for the whole of my work. I want to be explicit about this because every single branch of this tree, whether it is the quiet rigor of unlearning in my one-to-one maturation sessions, the deep group containment of my Body-Mind series workshops, the continuous practice available in my video-on-demand library, individual privates, my newsletters, or the physical nourishment I explore in the kitchen, all of it grows from the exact same root. It is all coming from the same trunk. It is a singular, continuous invitation to drop out of the internal swirl and return to a grounded, nourished state of aliveness. So when I returned home to Italy, I shared a bit of that time in New Orleans and what was unfolding on my various accounts and pages. And again, not to chase the metrics or likes or comments, but simply to remind myself of the essential importance of sharing human connection. Shortly after, An old client who had been quiet for some years saw that post on Instagram. And it wasn't a slick marketing hook that moved her. It was the resonance of seeing that human connection that spurred her to re-engage. She reached out and took an incredible, beautiful leap, engaging with the one-to-one body-mind maturation work for the very first time. Human connection in all its various forms cannot be managed or measured by the mind. When you speak, move, and share from a steady, grounded place, your vital energy travels across oceans and through screens. It lands exactly where it needs to land, with the people it is meant to resonate with. So if you are interested in beginning to explore this for yourself, the summer months can actually offer a beautiful supportive container for this kind of inquiry. As the external world naturally shifts into a slower, warmer cadence, the pressure to constantly achieve and produce often softens. There is a collective exhale that happens around us, making it a little easier to step away from the relentless metrics of the mind and find the spaciousness to meet our internal landscape. And the good news is, you don't need to gather new information, do more, or add another heavy chore to the load you are already carrying. Engaging in this body of work is about moving toward simplification. It is a conscious, intentional choice to gradually clear out the internal clutter so that whatever responsibilities or weights you are holding out in the world don't feel quite so heavy. Now, making that choice is rarely easy. When the demands of your daily life are weighing on you, whether you are managing a career, tending to a family, or navigating an overwhelming schedule, it can feel like you don't have a single second of time to spare for yourself. But we begin this exploration not by executing a massive task, but by finding the willingness to drop beneath the glass window and slowly meet the living reality of our own bodies. And this requires a complete shift in expectation, because learning how to navigate your internal landscape is a deeply layered lifelong journey. It is a learned skill set, not an instant cure or a quick fix. It requires patience, consistency, and very often the steady support of an experienced guide to help you hold the space when you hit your blind spots. So if you try to turn inward and all you feel is a chaotic swirl or a dense wall of numbness, please know that you are not failing. You aren't doing it wrong. That is precisely where the work begins. When an old pattern of holding or forcing arises over the coming months, the invitation is to pause. But let's be honest, in the moments when our bodies are tightly contracted or spinning in a story, a pause can feel like an absolute impossibility. The momentum of our patterns is incredibly strong, and trying to interrupt it in midair takes immense effort. So if you can't stop the wheel from turning, that is entirely okay. But if you can catch it, even for a split second, the invitation is to bring a gentle, raw curiosity to what is happening. We aren't trying to fix it or change it in that moment. We are just beginning to connect the dots between our physical bracing and our mental stories. It takes real, honest effort to just turn our attention toward what our body is physically telling us, to notice where the tension is sitting, where it's a tight jaw or a knot in the stomach, without letting the mind spin a whole story about it. It means being willing to sit with that uneasy feeling while also noticing the loud, stressed-out commentary your mind is throwing at you from behind the glass. To just stay steady in the middle of that internal tug-of-war without running away or trying to immediately fix it, it's a massive feat. But hearing it described as a massive feat might bring up an immediate wave of overwhelm for you. You might think, I'm already completely exhausted, overscheduled, and stressed. I don't have the time or energy for a massive feat. And if that is what is surfacing for you right now, know that it is completely normal. Learning how to show up for yourself right in the middle of that overwhelm and allowing yourself to take baby steps is precisely where your next level of learning, or as I often say, your unlearning, actually lives. Because when exhaustion goes deep, even the most ordinary daily task can begin to feel like a monumental burden. We often hear advice that tells us just to focus on the basics, to brush our teeth, wash our hair, clean our clothes, or change our sheets. But when you are entirely depleted, even those basic acts of self-care can feel completely out of reach. You look at the laundry or the dishes, and you literally do not have the physical or mental fuel to move. And that is the profound catch-22 of burnout. We think we have to get our physical environment or our chores sorted out before we can tend to our internal landscape. It works the exact opposite way. We need vital energy just to complete what are considered to be the absolute basics of daily life. If our internal house is completely cluttered and draining us behind the scenes, we will never find the momentum to take care of the outside world. That is why learning to tend to our daily energetic hygiene, the subtle ways we hold our boundaries, manage our outputs, and check in with our bodies, actually has to come first. It isn't an extra task to add to your to-do list. It is how you gather the very fuel required to live your life, so that those daily human tasks stop feeling so incredibly overwhelming. But we were never taught this in school, and we may not have grown up in an environment where this capacity was mirrored to us. Because of that, we may have not yet established a baseline for how to tend to our internal landscape. So when you look at your internal clutter, it is completely natural to feel paralyzed and wonder, where do I even begin? The truth is, the hardest part of this entire process is just starting. And there is absolutely no one-size-fits-all formula here. How you begin depends entirely on your unique circumstances, your history, and your specific relationship to your own body and mind. If you have a deeply ingrained habit of doing everything for everyone else, finding even 5 quiet minutes for yourself is going to feel entirely out of reach. When you are trapped in that hyper-independent loop, trying to break the pattern completely on your own is often where the wheels spin. A real shift happens when you build the capacity to say, I don't want to do this alone anymore. Stepping across that threshold and allowing yourself to be supported can feel incredibly uncomfortable at first. But once you give yourself permission to lean into that space, what becomes possible on the other side is quite breathtaking. It is how that felt impossibility finally softens into a lived reality. So, if you find yourself wanting to explore what that unique entry point looks like for your individual situation, please feel free to reach out to me directly. We can look at it together in a quiet one-on-one space to see what kind of containment would be best serving your layout. Because no matter what path you take, you slowly build this capacity in small, manageable increments. The internal tug of war, that consistent back and forth friction between the mind and the body, slowly fades over time. Sometimes the real hurdle isn't the practice itself. Sometimes the hardest part is simply considering ourselves worthy enough to show up for ourselves in the first place. This ongoing process of unlearning and maturation requires a beginner's mind, especially during a seasonal shift where our energy is calibrating to a new cadence. As we move into this summer season, I invite you to step away from the pressure of doing and measuring. Take a few quiet moments today to drop beneath the glass and give yourself the space to land exactly where you are, to tend to your own aliveness. You You are a living, breathing expression of life. May you never forget that. I would love to know what pop-throughs or insights surfaced for you during our time together today. Feel free to reach out. Share this episode with someone who you think it might prove supportive to, like or follow. Until next time, this has been your Reset Reflections with Christiane Piano. Be well. If you are interested in working with me on any level of body-mind well-being, whether it be through individual body-mind maturation work sessions, perhaps participating in a series, individual privates, or through my video on-demand services, if you have questions, if you would like to engage on any level, feel free to schedule a free 15-minute consult in the appointments section, www.christianepiano.com, or email me directly at growth@christianepiano.com.